grabar y los voy a mandar a Facebook Live. Un segundo.
Are we on?
Not yet. Okay, we are live. Perfecto. Bien, buen día a todos y bienvenidos al evento El Impacto de la Esperanza en la Economía. Mi nombre es Brenda Rodríguez, soy asistente de la Red Liberal de América Latina y antes de comenzar quiero darles unas breves indicaciones. Este evento va a contar con traducción simultánea y está activo. En la parte inferior de su pantalla verán un símbolo, es un globo terráqueo en donde pueden elegir ya sea español o inglés. Si van a escoger uno de los dos idiomas, sugiero silencien el audio original para que solo escuchen el idioma que han elegido y no escuchen doble. En caso de entender los dos idiomas, pueden mantener la herramienta apagada. Y si no les aparece es porque probablemente tienen una versión no actualizada de Zoom y solo van a poder escuchar la conferencia en su idioma original. Sin más, quiero cederle la palabra a Andrea Contreras, asistente de comunicación de la Fundación Friedrich Naumann. Adelante, Andrea.
Muchas gracias, Brenda. Sean todos bienvenidos a la conferencia El efecto de la esperanza en la economía, el tercer evento de la serie de conferencias para la innovación de la Red Liberal de América Latina RELIAL y de la Alianza para Centroamérica con el apoyo de la Fundación Friedrich Naumann. Quiero darle la palabra y la bienvenida a Berta Pantoja, presidenta de la Red Liberal de América Latina, y a Elizabeth Mailer, directora de proyectos para Centroamérica de la Fundación Friedrich Naumann para la Libertad. Les cedo la palabra.
Buenos días a todos, muchas gracias por acompañarnos. Cuando uno piensa en la obra de una historiadora, de un economista, no pensamos normalmente en innovación, no es lo que viene a nuestra cabeza, pero asociamos siempre en la palabra innovación con futuro, con lo que viene. Y sin embargo, yo creo que sería importante, y por eso es tan importante ahora tener a Deidre con nosotros, que se requieren condiciones para la innovación. Y a lo largo de toda la obra de Deidre podemos ver el despegue cómo se dio el despegue de la economía mundial, en los momentos específicos de la historia en que hemos dado esos grandes saltos y cómo la apuesta por la libertad ha sido fundamental en este crecimiento y en este desarrollo que hemos alcanzado. Yo no quiero extenderme mucho porque todos lo que queremos es oírla a ella. Solo quiero decir que a mí su último libro de ¿Por qué el liberalismo funciona? Me dejó una agradable sensación de optimismo y de que estamos en el camino correcto. Nos honra muchísimo, Deidre, que hayas aceptado acompañarnos. Yo les anuncio a Relial, a todos nuestros compañeros, que Deidre va a ser este año el premio Una Vida por la Libertad de Caminos de la Libertad y que aceptó acompañarnos en la asamblea de Relial el día 12, así es que espero que sea algo más para que se animen a venir. Deidre, muchísimas gracias. Agustín, mil gracias también a ti por aceptar acompañarnos. Muchas gracias a Elizabeth por su trabajo, a Sigrid Herzog por su apoyo, a Silvia Mercado, a Brenda Rodríguez y a Annelisa Artigas por su ayuda. Y bueno, gracias a todos.
Muy buenos días, es un gran gusto para mí poderles dar la más cordial bienvenida en nombre de la Fundación Friedrich Naumann y la Alianza para Centroamérica a esta siguiente edición de las 5 propuestas para la innovación, un proyecto de Relial y la Alianza para Centroamérica precisamente en el sentido de encontrar propuestas innovadoras para reactivar el futuro, mirar hacia el futuro, y qué gran inspiración y qué gran honor contar hoy con la presencia de Deidre McCloskey. Muchísimas gracias, Deidre, por aceptar nuestra invitación. Gracias también a Agustín, por supuesto, y bueno, Berta como presidenta de Realidades, Silvia Mercado, mis colegas Brenda Rodríguez, Andrea Contreras y Fanny Soleno, que nos apoyan con toda esta organización de esta conferencia. Espero disfruten mucho esta edición de las 5 propuestas para la innovación. Bienvenidos, gracias.
Ahora es un honor para mí presentarles a nuestra invitada estrella del día de hoy, la economista y profesora estadounidense Deidre McCloskey. Ella se define a sí misma como aristotélica, feminista, episcopal, cuantitativa, posmoderna, defensora del libre mercado. Ha escrito 20 libros y cerca de 400 artículos de teoría económica, historia económica, filosofía, teoría estadística, feminismo, ética y derecho. Hoy día es profesora distinguida de Economía, Historia, Inglés y Comunicación de la Universidad de Illinois. Les presento también a nuestro excelente moderador, Agustín Etchebarne. Agustín ha sido profesor de la UBA y la SAD y actualmente enseña en la Universidad de Belgrano. Es especialista en desarrollo económico, comercialización estratégica y mercados internacionales. Es fundador del Foro Republicano y actualmente es director general de Libertad y Progreso. Adelante, Agustín.
Bueno, muchas gracias a ti y a Berta y también a la Fundación Naumann y a Relial que hacen posible estos encuentros. Para mí es un honor enorme poder estar conversando con Deidre. Yo empecé a estudiar economía en su momento con microeconomía, con The Applied Theory of Prices, ¿no? En sus libros. Y de ahí hemos visto he leído algunos de los libros y por supuesto me falta un montón porque son más de 14 libros que ha tenido. Y la verdad es que cuando repasaba un poco todo este tema, la cantidad de preguntas que nos van surgiendo son enormes. Así es que voy a empezar simplemente con una primera, pero seguramente luego también en el público va a tener la oportunidad de hacer sus preguntas. El tema que nos toca es esto de la esperanza en la economía. ¿Cuáles son estas razones para el optimismo, ¿no? Como lo diría en su momento Matt Ridley, el optimismo racional? ¿Cuáles son los motivos racionales para ser optimista en un mundo donde mucha gente habla de las cosas negativas? Pero me gustaría, Deidre, si puedes hablarlo también, pensando que nuestra audiencia en gran medida es latinoamericana. Y en América Latina tenemos algo que es tremendo, que los países a los que mejor yo soy argentino, pero no solo Argentina, sino también otros países que les ha ido bien y que llegaron a estar al borde de ser países desarrollados como Venezuela o Cuba, en algún momento decidimos de alguna manera cometer un suicidio social y desandar todo lo andado e ir para atrás. Y me interesa mucho esta pregunta en el caso tuyo, sobre todo sabiendo que, si mal no recuerdo, vienes también con un pasado de haber sido marxista. Entonces, ¿cómo es posible que de alguna manera, a pesar de los logros económicos, en algún momento uno vuelva hacia atrás y vuelva hacia el socialismo? Nos encantaría si puedes conversarnos un poco sobre esos temas.
Shall I start?
Yes, please.
The speech which I'll give is very short, but of course you've heard professors say that before. But it's on hope, Esperanza, in the economy. Now I'm a Christian. I'm an Anglican, and the great statement by St. Paul is the 3 so-called Christian virtues are supposed to be faith, hope, and love. And love is the greatest of these. And those 3 virtues were kind of added on to the 4 cardinal virtues in the classical thinking of Greece and Rome, namely prudence, temperance, courage, and justice. So you add those 3, faith, hope, and love, add those on top of those, and you have a reasonably complete philosophical psychology. these virtues in one form or another are praised in all cultures, from Confucian China to Hindu, South Asia, to the tales of the Indians, of Indios of the plains in the United States. They're praised in the movies. They're praised in our gossip and conversation, each of these virtues. And hope is among them. Now, hope, St. Paul says, is faith in something unseen. Now, the crucial thing here is that the economy is always, its future is always unseen. And economics is about the future. It's always deciding about the future. The big mistake in early economics of Adam Smith, I always cross myself when I mention Adam Smith or Ricardo or Marx, is their devotion to the labor theory of value, which is a backward-looking, justice-oriented, you might say, view of the economy. And you find that in modern Marxism in its discussion of structures and how important structures of class in particular are for the economy. But even in what I call Samuelsonian economics, which is the orthodox economics of the United States, there's a tendency to look backwards, back at input-output analysis, which I once studied, or to look, here's a more fundamental one, the production function. In analytic economics, in the economics that we teach to students, we put great emphasis on the production function. And the problem is that it's not just that it's static in the sense that it doesn't involve time. It's that it's not about the future. And an economic decision now, your economic decision to buy something at the grocery store, or the decision of the central banker to raise the money supply or something like that, is always about the future. It's never about the past. This is a problem that lawyers have when they come to think about economics, because a lawyer, of course, is concerned with justice. And justice in a legal sense is always backward looking. Are you guilty? Did you do the crime? If you do the crime, you got to spend the time. I'm hoping that's going to happen to Donald Trump. And so it's backward looking. That kind of fairness is backward looking. But for an economist, it should be forward looking. And the problem is, of course, that we can know the past. I'm an economic historian. I'm very interested in it. And, I like dead people. The more dead, the more I'm interested in them. But to understand an economy, you have to be thinking of the future, and the future is unpredictable. Now, of course, much of our future can be predicted. Tomorrow, the sun will rise, as we say. and I have no doubt it will. But crucial elements of our economy are not predictable. Any investment, for example, in an apartment building that you're building to make money, or opening a store, or choosing an occupation, or changing jobs, all of those, we say, are speculative. They're about hope. They're about things unseen. Now, this is something that most economists don't like to think about. The economists who have thought about it, such as Austrian economists, so-called, or certain others, actually Keynes, who was the hero of my youth, Keynes knew vividly that the economy was about the future. And yet he imposed a macroeconomics, which was mainly about structure, things like the consumption function. One of the early important contributions of Milton Friedman was his great book, probably his best book, called A Theory of the Consumption Function, which essentially pointed out that the consumption function is not something static, structural about the past. It's a decision that people make over the life cycle, for example. So hope is fundamental to economic analysis. Now, in the ordinary sense of hope, we have hope that COVID will end. We have hope that the economy will spring back, come back fast. We have hope that we'll continue to get better off in material circumstances. We have hope that our children will do well in the economy and the society. We have hope about life. We have hope that we have a long life and prosperous and happy retirement years, such as I have right now. And here, there's a historical dimension to this. In the last 2 centuries, real income per person in countries like Finland, Japan, Germany, Brazil, Mexico, the United States, even now China and India are participating in this, increased not by a little, not by doubling 100% or tripling 200%, but hear this, by 3,000%, by a factor of 30. The average citizen of Mexico, Argentina, Italy, Turkey, whatever you want to name, has experienced in the last 2 centuries, sometimes rather recently, this enormous increase. And the enormous increase is usually analyzed by economists, whether on the left or the right, as investment, as capital accumulation. But that's backward looking. Growth theory, so-called in economics, is backward looking. It's not about innovation in particular. It's about piling up oil wells, or piling up houses, or piling up university educations. So it comes out of a structural, backward-looking way of thinking about the world. And it's although I'm an economic historian and I'm all for looking backwards, I think the main thing we learned from the past 2 centuries is that innovation was the key. It wasn't capital accumulation. It wasn't resources. It wasn't even trade. It was innovation. New ideas. I mean, take as simple an idea as a limited access highway, right? The Autobahn was the first of these in Germany. No science involved, just the idea that if you have finally gotten to the point where you have automobiles that go very fast, it might be better not to have, I don't know, the driveway of your house opening onto a road in which people in Mercedes cars are going at 100 kilometers an hour. So a limited access highway. There are, I think it's fair to say, millions of those aha moments, those eureka moments that have been somehow encouraged in the last 2 centuries. Now, humans have always innovated. Someone invented a bow and arrow. Someone invented chocolate, found that you could make something nice, tasting a nice drink from those beans, and so forth. So people have always innovated. But there was an amazing increase in the amount of innovation starting in England, especially in even before England in Holland, after around 1800, starting in Holland about a century earlier. And then it just spread everywhere, and everyone was innovating like mad. And the result, that's what made us rich. Not capital accumulation, which is necessary and interesting, but not the cause. I think of it in terms of a mechanical watch, right? The old-fashioned mechanical watch. It has gears and the clock face and the hands and so forth, and all case, and all those are necessary. But what's sufficient to make the clock work is the spring. And the spring in the last couple of centuries has been innovation. So to have hope for the future of the economy, one has to know why innovation happens. And the answer is that it happens when you make people free. In fact, I've argued at some length that that's why we got this astonishing increase in the last 2 centuries. I mean, we freed the slaves, we freed the Indios, we freed women, we freed gays, we freed immigrants, we freed colonial people. Liberation made people bold, speaking of courage, made them courageous. And for the first time in history, all people were thought to be created equal. I mean, this is true in this basic idea of liberalism, a word that didn't exist until the 1700s. The first coinage of it in English is by the philosopher David Hume. Liberalism, the idea that we all have equal permission to enter occupations, to start businesses, to say what we want, to paint what we want, to write what we want. That's all equality of permission. It's not equality of opportunity. That's a false god. It's not equality of opportunity. It's equality of permission. So in a liberal economy, the state is not constantly intervening in your permission to open a factory or to move to a new job. And it turned out that this new idea, what made it new is, you see, it was very new. It was an idea of the 1700s. It was not deep in European culture. It was not a result of Christianity or any of these sort of Eurocentric explanations. It was because by a series of accidents in the 16th, 17th, and 18th century, some Europeans, especially in Northwestern Europe, in Holland, England, and Scotland, came to see themselves as liberated and to some extent were factually free. I mean, this liberalism spread. The Spanish Constitution of 1812 is a liberal document in many ways. So it's liberalism that made the modern world. And if we don't suppress it, it will continue to result in innovation. The modern fashion, I hope it's not true in your country, but it's certainly true in mine, the modern fashion for, what's it called? Industrial planning, where you'll have people in the capital deciding on what innovation shall take place, is a particularly foolish violation of economic thinking. The economy is about the future. The economy is very hard to predict. Who knows better whether the investment in this grocery store, this very grocery store, is intelligent to do than the person on the scene? Why would it seem plausible that bureaucracy in the country's capital, staffed by people with no local knowledge, as Hayek put it, would be better at deciding innovation in the economy, what we're going to try out? I have a friend who's in marketing, and she's told me this is very remarkable. She's working now on a project on dog treats, little bones or something that you give to your dog. She's now recorded new dog treats this year, new ones, not the old ones, but the new ones, in the number of, now hear this, 1,700, 1,700 new dog treats.
Wow.
Now, this is almost insane. This is almost crazy, but it's the kind of innovism. It's the kind of ideology of innovation that characterizes lots of countries that are even moderately free in their economies. People are coming up with new ideas, hoping to make some money, and it's often not just money, it's honor, the glory of a new app on your phone. You know, you can make millions of dollars if you get an app that people like. So trying out things is the big, now understand, the permission to try out things, considering the grave uncertainty of the future.
Excellent.
Trial and error is the way an innovative economy works. And you could say that this thing we call capitalism, which I prefer to call innovism because the word capitalism is so misleading. But innovism, you could also call it trial and errorism. You open a restaurant with your mole and so forth, and it's no good. No one comes. So those resources are released to go to the hope of some other entrepreneur. So I'll simply conclude by making, against my own principles, some economic and two economic predictions. In the short run, I think we will recover very quickly from COVID once we're all vaccinated. And that's because the restaurants and other businesses that have closed, gone bankrupt, ruining many lives, that economic place, so to speak, is still there. If it was a good idea to have a local restaurant in your neighborhood that people went to, and it went bankrupt, it'll still be a good idea to have a local restaurant in your neighborhood. So I think it'll open rather quickly. And then for the longer run, the only danger to economic growth, as to intellectual growth and social growth, is illiberalism, is the attack on the idea that individual people should be liberated to try out things. That's what could kill innovation. A turn back to the constant temptation of socialism. I mean, we all know the story of Argentina, which was 100 years ago one of the richest countries in the world. And starting in the 30s and then in the 40s with Juan Perón, it went to intervening in the economy. It went illiberal. And the Argentinians are still struggling with this. They still have this nostalgia for Evita and Perón. And that's a continuing economic disaster in Argentina. Fortunately, it hasn't turned harshly authoritarian. And that's a good thing. And maybe it'll come back and people will recover this optimism about the future, this even irrational optimism about the future, which is so characteristic of a liberal society, a society in which ordinary men and women can try, can venture. So that's my pitch. Hope is central.
Excelente. Yo sigo muy de cerca esas ideas y estoy de acuerdo con ellas. Y la pregunta que tengo y que me gustaría, porque aprovechar que también tienes conocimientos de filosofía y de comunicación, es primero entender por qué, de alguna manera, nos pasa esto a los seres humanos, a las civilizaciones, que cuando tenemos frente a nuestros ojos los resultados positivos de la libertad y de la innovación y el crecimiento enorme de la economía, incluso cuando miramos un poco, tratamos de prever el futuro y vemos esta aceleración de la innovación. Pareciera que hay una aceleración de la capacidad innovadora de los seres humanos. Pero ¿por qué es que tenemos esta tendencia a veces a buscar lo negativo, a buscar el vaso medio vacío, ¿no? Vemos el gran progreso de Chile durante 35, 40 años, y sin embargo el pueblo se queja y termina incendiando los subtes o los edificios. Vemos lo que pasó en Venezuela, en Argentina, ya lo hablamos. ¿Qué idea tienes de por qué nos ocurre? ¿Esto es normal? Y sobre todo me interesa, yendo hacia adelante, desde el lado de la comunicación, ¿qué podemos hacer los liberales para enfrentar esta situación, para tratar de mostrar todas estas ventajas? por supuesto, tenemos los datos de Hans Rosling con Gapminder, que es una herramienta extraordinaria, tenemos Angus Madison, pero sin embargo pareciera que hay un nivel que tiene más que ver con las emociones que con la racionalidad. ¿Qué nos puedes decir con respecto a todo esto?
Am I supposed to understand that or not?
I hope so.
Well, I don't know. Should I be turning into the, let's see, should I be listening to?
I'm sorry, you were listening to me in Spanish?
Yeah, interpretation. Should I press on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I get English.
Yes.
Should I press on English or Spanish?
English.
Okay. So I didn't hear your question, dear. Can you ask it in English?
Yeah, no, the idea is that if you, we agree on about your view about the optimism that you can gather from the information about the past, no? Like the history, and then the rational optimism, and you can see even that the innovation is somewhat accelerating, no? Like Ray
it is.
In the singularities near that he says that he's coming fast and faster, and we can see all these achievements of the world that have been so amazing. But how come that in our countries, in Venezuela, in Argentina, in Chile, after 30 years of an amazing growth, the people doesn't see it, and at some point
I mean, obviously, I'm not the person to answer that. But I ask it all the time. I do know Chile a good deal, and the kind of basic guilt that Chilean liberals feel that their ideas were imposed by a dictatorship, and that's always haunted Chile over the last 30 or 40 years. But come on, in my country too, and in all countries, people forget what made their situation good. An odd example, not on the economic point, is feminism. I'm old enough that I remember very well how women were treated in the United States and elsewhere in 1950. My mother could not have a bank account on her own. Her husband had to sign for it, right? Now that's all changed. But young women tend not to realize how much they've gained from the efforts of their grandmothers and their mothers, if you see what I mean. And the same is true in the economy. I suppose. Look, here's one of the problems. Socialism is tempting. Look, we all grow up in families, and families are socialist enterprises. So a kind of naive, I don't know, view of a teenager, such as I was when I was a socialist, is that, oh, well, we ought to have a national family. Now, of course, it doesn't work in what Hayek called the Great Society. It works among friends. It works in a family. So I don't understand. You know, Venezuela is a particularly shocking case. There it happened quickly. One of, if not the richest country in Latin America.
And do you have any idea of how can we change this? Maybe in your own experience, how did you change from being a Marxist or a socialist into coming to see the things in a different way?
Yeah, in a very different way. Although I still know more of the Marxist songs than many of my Marxist friends. I was a folk singer, you know, I'd play the guitar and kind of play it, not very well, and sing
Love to
labor
listen.
songs and Los Cuatros Generales, blah, blah. It's hard. Look, all we have is sweet talk. All we have is what you and I do for a living, which is to persuade students or newspaper readers. I mean, there's no other trick. We can't, I don't know, pass a law that you must be a liberal. That's not only stupid and would be ineffective, but it's also fundamentally contrary to liberalism.
That's my other question that I always have. Why is that, but probably this is something that you have already said, that why is that Piketty, for instance, is so famous, no? With those books that are boring in a way.
I completely agree. Look, I did a review of his first book at some length. It's about a 50-page review. I
used to review us about like 50 pages.
And I was very polite because I don't think he's a bad man or is a hypocrite or something. I think he believes this stuff. But his view of the economy is very much this backward-looking view that I was pointing to, not about hope. It's all about mechanism, and we're caught in this alleged machine. Now, there are all kinds of ways that his book is wrong, but people want to believe this story. They want to believe that for example, we all know this. They want to believe that when something goes wrong, at least we believe it's going wrong, and there's a big difference between those two. But anyway, we believe something's going wrong, climate change or the economy isn't as prosperous as we thought. We want a villain. We want a bad person, to blame. And so it's those damn capitalists, they're to blame. And he makes the kind of absurd argument that it's essential. What he is essentially arguing is that it's the taking of interest that causes the problem. There was this English anthropologist who died a few years ago. What was his name? He said Debt, the First 4,000 Years was his book. Another big book that became very popular on the left. And again, his claim was that it's the taking of interest that is evil. And this that's the original sin of capitalism.
And the other big thing is the inequality, right? And
but as I say in my review, he didn't measure inequality correctly. And he didn't find that actually most countries were getting more unequal. In any case, are the football players who earn millions, is there something wrong there? This is Robert Nozick's old point. If I pay voluntarily to see some great soccer player, he gets rich. I don't complain. I pay the money to see him. So there a great deal of the inequality of the economy either is from some unusual skill, like being able to sing well, Frank Sinatra or something, or it's a signal, an absolutely necessary signal from the economy, so to speak, make more brain surgeons. Brain surgeons are paid more than janitors because the economy wants more brain surgeons to be made. And if we say, no, that's unfair, we're going to pay brain surgeons the same as janitors, we won't get the correct amount of brain surgeons or janitors for that matter. So the whole thing, all this talk of inequality is largely silly.
But it's a very attractive issue in politics, not to tax
Of course
the
it
rich.
is. Of course it is.
You tax the rich and you can fix all
Exactly.
the problems.
Jeff Bezos makes billions. Oh, that's terrible. Oh, I hate Jeff Bezos. Put him in jail. Hang him from the lamppost. And the other point I make in the review is that if you imposed egalitarianism, it wouldn't save the poor. And to understand that, you have to understand how big growth has been in the last 2 centuries. If it was a doubling, then maybe stealing from the billionaires and giving it to poor people would really be good. But the trouble is that it's 3,000%.
Yeah.
Not 100%, but 3,000%. And the only way you're going to get that is innovation. And the only way you're going to get innovation is some inequality. But of course, you know, all these are myths, because under socialism, it's not equal. The old joke in the Soviet Union was, under capitalism, man exploits man. Under socialism, it's the other way around. And it was the case in the Soviet Union. If you were a high member of the Communist Party, you had a nice vacation spot in the Black Sea and a dacha outside of Moscow and an apartment in Moscow and an automobile. And if you were not, even the prison camps, even the Gulag was graded by where you were in the Communist Party. Lots of high Communist Party officials were put in prison camps, but they were very nice. If you were just an ordinary Russian, not even a member of the Communist Party, when you went to prison, it was really, really bad. So this whole idea of, you know, the whole inequality thing is kind of stupid, because if you let this 3,000% work, then the ordinary person is so much better off that real comfort is equal between the rich and the poor. Look, Jeff Bezos could easily have 6 yachts, 100-foot yachts if he wanted. So what? I don't want to be out on the ocean. I'm perfectly happy in my apartment in Chicago. I got enough to eat. I can go to my club and have nice lunch. I have 3,000 books. And I'm just an ordinary person. I'm not a multi-billionaire. So, whereas in 1800, there was a big difference between the health, for example, of rich people and poor people. Now, much less.
There's a big problem in measurement of the...
There is, for example, one thing that people neglect to measure, and it's very foolish, it's pretty obvious you need to, are transfers in kind, especially housing subsidies, food subsidies to the poor. Those have to be included in the income of the poor, or you're not doing it correctly. And if you do that correctly, inequality in the United States has decreased in the last 30 years. It's actually fallen. So, you know, the whole thing is kind of made out of paper. It's maddening. Whereas what we need to focus on is the big issue of having a free society in which people can venture. They can
Sí, si tienen alguna pregunta, por favor, si están viéndonos directamente en Facebook, la pueden hacer ahí, si no la pueden hacer en Zoom, en la sección de abajo donde dice preguntas y respuestas. Tenemos una de Rebeca Abarcas que dice, in countries like Venezuela, is it possible to recover economy maintaining the same government? They have opened up their policies, but some are still reluctant to make business like this.
Well, once a political class has decided or is in power, they want to just go on the way they are. I mean, a spectacular example is happening in Brazil, where Bolsonaro's popularity is down to around 12%. Yet he clings to power. So policies don't change. There are two countries that I'm a little bit familiar with. South Africa, where I've taught for a number of months, and Brazil, where I've frequently visited. They could be growing as fast as India is, say, or China. But they're attached to this backward-looking, structural, regulated, interventionist economy. To start a business in South Africa is very difficult. So permission is not granted.
Here I see another question is about women in the liberal movement, the libertarian movement. How can we attract more women to the libertarian movement? You know, like
I would like to know. I've just gone on the board of Lola, Ladies of Liberty, which is a Latin American, basically, and they don't have any members in Europe, which is very odd. But it's only about 5 years old, and so we're trying to change that. I don't know why that is. I think perhaps women are more oriented towards security. I mean, they want their children to survive, whereas the men are more venturesome I have to say, often in a careless and stupid way. So maybe that's why liberalism, as I prefer to call it, is not as attractive to women as it is to men. But in fact, it's women who have been the main beneficiaries, or one among the very big beneficiaries of liberalism.
Tenemos otra pregunta, disculpa, de Manuel de Almeida. ¿Cómo y por qué fue su evolución de marxista a liberal?
Well, people ask that all the time, but as I told you, we're all raised in families. So we're raised in a socialist enterprise, appropriately. Families should be. You don't charge money to your children for lunch, I hope. We don't have a market in secondhand children and things like that. No, it should be a socialist enterprise. And so now that's not true if you grow up on a farm or you're involved as a child in a small business. You help in the shop, for example. Then you learn about the economy and you learn how markets work and so forth. But I didn't. I was the child of a professor. Daddy went away to the office, and money fell like manna from heaven. And if you grow up that way, you're very likely to think that, well, we can just make the whole economy into a family. So that's how I started. But then I started to study economics, and I was still in socialism because I was a Keynesian. And then I was a social engineer. And then as I studied economic history, I gradually understood the value of liberty.
Muchas gracias. Mike de Libertarian tiene otra pregunta. Is the great fact reversible? I mean, undoable? Are we in a strong or delicate capitalist equilibrium?
Well, again, I don't like the word capitalist. I call it innovism. No, I don't think it's it's delicate or about to collapse or anything like that. As people are innovating all over every economy unless they're stopped. In Stalinist Russia, people were stopped from innovating. So when finally communism fell, even people on the left had to agree that income in the Soviet Union was very low. But if you have a minimal amount of liberalism, even, you don't have to be completely liberal to have an innovative economy, but have a minimal amount, and then it continues to grow. It's not precarious. I have friends. Look, it's much more popular to write pessimistic books. If I just wanted to make money, I would say, oh, the sky is falling, the end of the world is near. And I would sell hundreds of thousands of copies. Friends of mine have. But I just don't think it's true. I don't think it's precarious.
Bueno, creo que aunque tenemos otras preguntas en el chat muy interesantes, tenemos que dar cierre y le cedo la palabra a Siegfried Herzog, director de la Fundación Friedrich Naumann para Latinoamérica, para que dé unas palabras de cierre.
Thank you very much, Brenda, and thank you very much, Professor McCloskey and Professor Etchebarne, Agustín Etchebarne. We have heard a fascinating interaction about the role of hope in the economy. I'll try to summarize the key things that I've learned from it. Maybe they'll be wrong, but what I take away is first that hope is really an integral part of the key human virtues that basically animate all societies. And what I haven't figured out or understood until now is that the same impulse, hope, faith in the unseen, is a key driver, is a key factor in the economy, that all our economic decisions are indeed expressions of hope, a faith in the future, faith in the unseen. But at the same time, as we know, the future is uncertain and people hate uncertainty. So this makes us nervous. It makes even economists nervous. And this probably explains why we tend to look for security in looking backwards, in looking at structures to somehow have a more firm basis in explaining or in thinking why this will work out.
I think that's right.
But that blinds us to the fact that, as you said, innovation is really the key driver of the economy, and that trial and error is what enabled the economy to grow once we were allowed, and once everybody was basically allowed to hope, to dream, to try, the freedom to do so for all. So in that sense, the pursuit of happiness is probably one of the greatest expressions of this in the American Declaration of Independence, and we tend to overlook how important that has been, and that unleashing of creativity and hope drove the enrichment of the last 200 years, the great enrichment, as you call it.
Yes.
And lastly, we discussed a little bit that people somehow fail to understand this fully or forget the role that this liberation has played. One is that we like to have villains. We like to have, since we don't like uncertainty, we prefer a narrative, something that explains the world to us. And we don't like to be at the mercy of just, some things have worked and some things haven't worked without a moral argument behind it. It's terrifying us because it's a loss of control. So this instinct of security, this instinct of wanting to have some control is probably the big thing behind this problem of illiberalism that we are facing and that threatens
I think you're right.
And do the things. I hope I summarized your thinking on this correctly, Professor McCloskey.
Well, you extended my thinking because you emphasized what I think is correct, this need for security.
Right. I guess that is behind, because I took it from you when you mentioned that women look a bit more at security, and I think that is the driver behind this. So thank you very much. This has been really enlightening, enriching, and thank you to Agustín Etchebarne for being the sparring partner, and for the team of Relial and of the FNF Central America for putting all this together. Thank you, and I hope to see you soon here.
I enjoyed it. Wiedersehen and goodbye and ciao, ciao. Okay, dears.
Wiedersehen.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy the East Coast. Bye.
I will. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Gracias, voy a detener la transmisión en vivo.